Hey, my name is Amoga, co-founder and CEO of Carbon Origins. We're a robotics and VR company on a mission to make robots commonplace. So we're a group of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. We have landed robots on Mars, we've launched suborbital rockets, we've deployed satellite constellations, developed VR technologies for Disney. We're very passionate about deep tech, and we see robotics as the future of front-end labor. And our goal is to incubate that in a location, in a place where it can get the most TLC. We originally started the company in California, but we moved to Minnesota a few months ago. Really affordable to build robots in the United States here in Minnesota. There are a lot of contract manufacturers here with the right expertise. There are other companies building robots here. It is going to be the hotbed for robot manufacturing. The reason is, if you can build Skippies, our robots, to work in the Minnesota weather and geography, they can work anywhere.
Now, when you hire someone with a disability, you've immediately led by example. You've said you trust a new perspective, that you're confident in that person, in yourself, and your team. Now, I work with a theater company, and we have signs on the wall that say, "Work your quirk," and radical inclusion. They emphasize that what makes us different gives us strength, a new perspective, a creative edge. In Cajun cooking, there's an ingredient called the lagniappe, and it's that little something something that keeps you coming back. Hire somebody with a disability. It's the lagniappe thing to do.
So, you've decided to start your own business. You have the resources to sell or the services your new customers need. So what's next? Here's a simple checklist to help you get started. First, choose your business structure. Do you want a sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability company, or corporation? Each form has tax and financial consequences. Next, check to make sure the name you want to use for your business is available. You can do this by checking with the Minnesota Secretary of State office. If you want to be a sole proprietor, all you have to do is register the business name with the Secretary of State office. Or if your business is going to be an LLC or a corporation, when you file the business structure registration with the Secretary of State's office, that registration also includes the business name. After that, you may need to obtain federal and state tax identification numbers from the Internal Revenue Service and the Minnesota Department of Revenue. Note that some businesses won't need to take this step. Need is determined by the number of business owners, if the business will have employees, and if the business makes taxable sales or provides taxable services. Next, obtain any necessary licenses and permits from state and local government. Then you will need to buy or rent space for the business and set up phone and internet service. You'll also want to start a banking and credit relationship with a bank or other financial institution. And don't forget to write a business plan with benchmarks to guide you through business growth. We can help you.
And remember, if you need help in any of these steps, please reach out to us here at the Small Business Assistance Office. We have staff available to answer your questions.
My name is John Hauk. I am president of LightRun Incorporated. LightRun manufactures and sells a specialized unweighting tool for survivors of stroke, traumatic brain injury, and other injuries. I started out my career working for a company called Cardiac Pacemakers, then later on St. Jude Medical, along with a couple of startups in between. So I came out of the cardiac world, and Minnesota has been a great place for a medical device career. Our product has been sold and is currently being used in Hennepin County Medical Center, the VA Hospital in Minneapolis, North Memorial Hospital, and we're soon going to be delivering a system to Courage Kenny. So we are getting local traction in spite of the pandemic, and our goal is to go nationwide in 2022 and beyond.
Well, I met Andrew in 2010. He was a recent graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So he already had his education before he came to us. And he was looking for work as an architect.
And I applied for over 200 jobs all over the U.S. I applied for jobs in Hawaii, New York, Florida, and didn't get any sort of response. And after I'd applied for all of those different jobs, I realized that the job market right now is really low and that I was facing discrimination, as were a lot of people with disabilities.
So he's deaf and the world is hearing, and so of course the biggest barrier for him was communication. He worked with MCIL on job interviewing skills, and he did a very nice job talking about his experience and his work qualifications, but he did struggle a little bit with the accommodation issue, and so we worked a little bit more on that.
It was my good fortune to meet Andrew back in 2007, 2008. Andrew was someone who was deaf and he had graduated from architectural school. Really my charge was, how can I help Andrew network, take smaller steps given what the economy was.
He really advocated in my job search. He wants people to get out there. He connected me with people in the field because that's what I needed. He reached out to MnDOT, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, in the Affirmative Action Office. He contacted Lynette Geschwind. She was the head of the Affirmative Action Office at MnDOT. And she was able to set up a contract job for me to inspect airport terminals. It was a fascinating job, but again, it was contract work. And they actually didn't seem to see me as a person with disabilities. Based on my resume, they said via email that they were just really impressed with my experience, and they wanted to give me a chance.
When we launched Andrew, we were not focused on his disability. We helped him develop the skills to market himself as an architect. No one with a disability gets a job because of their disability. It's all about skills, and Andrew's a perfect example of someone that took what we helped him learn and was able to independently get a job in the private sector.
Do you run a small business in Minnesota? Are you trying to expand your operations? Or need help adjusting to changes brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic? Then contact your local Small Business Development Center.
We'd like you to know that whether you're starting a brand new business, growing an existing one, or if your business needs help because of the COVID pandemic, the SBDC can provide that help, and it won't cost you a penny.
These are hard times, but if you need help with your business, Small Business Development Centers have real professionals standing by, ready to help you develop your business plan, do marketing and research, set up your accounting, gain access to capital, and much more. And they do it all for free. So contact us today at mnsbdc.com.
In Minnesota, we're training our workforce for the next chapter of the global economy.
Can't wait to get started on this project.
It's great hands-on practice.
I think our students will love it.
I'll bring this to the robotics lab.
Our education and business climate are among the best in the nation. And they work together to grow creative, high-skilled talent.
Parts can we make at this machine? The possibilities are almost endless.
We're a state that works hard, boasting one of the highest participation rates in America's workforce.
Awesome, man. This looks great. We can really do anything here.
Great things are happening in Minnesota, and we can help you thrive.
Final touch, man. Checkmate.
Join us.
Hi, my name is Amoga, co-founder and CEO of Carbon Origins. We're a robotics and VR company on a mission to make robots commonplace. So we're a group of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. We have landed robots on Mars, we've launched suborbital rockets, we've deployed satellite constellations, developed VR technologies for Disney. We're very passionate about deep tech, and we see robotics as the future of front-end labor. And our goal is to incubate that in a location, in a place where it can get the most TLC. We originally started the company in California, but we moved to Minnesota a few months ago. Really affordable to build robots in the United States here in Minnesota. There are a lot of contract manufacturers here with the right expertise. There are other companies building robots here. It is going to be the hotbed for robot manufacturing. The reason is, if we can build Skippies, our robots, to work in the Minnesota weather and geography, they can work anywhere.
Now, when you hire someone with a disability, you've immediately led by example. You've said you trust a new perspective, that you're confident in that person, in yourself, and your team. Now, I work with a theater company, and we have signs on the wall that say, "Work your quirk," and radical inclusion. They emphasize that what makes us different gives us strength, a new perspective, a creative edge. In Cajun cooking, there's an ingredient called the lagniappe, and it's that little something something that keeps you coming back. Hire somebody with a disability. It's the lagniappe thing to do.
So, you've decided to start your own business. You have the resources to sell or the services your new customers need. So what's next? Here's a simple checklist to help you get started. First, choose your business structure. Do you want a sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability company, or corporation? Each form has tax and financial consequences. Next,
Good morning. Is Commissioner Harpstead there to kick us off? Looks like she's not. Steve, can you pinch hit?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. Steve Grove here, Commissioner of DEED. Welcome to the Governor's Council on Economic Expansion. We are holding this meeting remotely for convenience sake and due to the COVID-19 pandemic pursuant to Minnesota statutes. And with that, I'll turn it over to our chairs, Paul Williams and Jeff Ettinger.
Great. Well, welcome, everyone. June 6th. Wow. Did that go fast? I remember sitting back, we kind of started phase 2, thinking we've got 6 months. It's it, well, boom, there we are. So just a big thank you to everybody for a lot of good work here. And I especially want to give a shout out to the staff for some really good work here in the last, throughout the process. But this last few weeks, they've really dug into a lot of writing and a lot of good work, I think, pulling our thoughts together. So going through the roadmap, the draft roadmap today, I was just really impressed at kind of just the depth of work and how heavy a lift it is to try and pull all this together into one kind of coherent document. But it feels to me like we're making good progress. So big shout out to the staff across the board, and thank you to everybody for your time. Council timeline here, you'll see we are at June 6th, kind of in a public input phase, but also in a writing and drafting phase, and a kind of a revising phase on several fronts. I know that there was a group that met to do some work last week on kind of our preface and kind of initial language there, the preamble. That's been moving ahead, and then also some good work on subcommittees, and we started kind of some broader public input processes. So we've got one more meeting on June 27th, I believe. And Liz and others, am I right that we're going to try and do that in person, correct? I know we...
Anderson, not trying to withhold that information.
No.
We're going to meet at Anderson again.
Yeah.
2 to 4.
Okay, great. So more to come at the end there on that one. If you can go to that next slide after the timeline, just in terms of additional public engagement. So obviously we're in kind of a process now of sharing some of our draft language and being open to broader public input. We've getting feedback coming into our broader email address. I think the draft language is kind of up on our website, and people are able to look at that and comment on that. So we'll be, and I think you guys are kind of collating the feedback as well. I saw in one of the links that we can look at that and kind of see what folks are having to say. Sharing it on social media, on DEED's main page. Obviously, hoping all of you can share it with your networks as you see fit, and that's a good opportunity just to, again, kind of get the word out. We had a good town hall last week with the governor's public engagement advisory group, about 30 plus folks on the call. Good number of council members were part of that call. Really appreciate everybody attending, and a number of you also presented in quick fashion. I know it went by quickly, but again, it matters to have council members kind of in place to do those, to make those presentations, good overviews, good questions, and so again, just kind of an opportunity to kind of share our messaging and our draft language more broadly. And then we've also got a call later this week, Thursday of this week, with tribal leadership. The governor has a weekly tribal engagement call that we're going to be a part of on Thursday at the end of the day at 4 o'clock. So lots of kind of engagement going on out there, and in the weeks to come, I think we'll be again kind of feeding back a lot of what we're hearing. So
I was wondering if any of the council members who were at the town hall kind of wanted to share about what the feedback was like, if anyone wants to go ahead and share.
Any takeaways from any of that? No. Well, my impressions were that, some good questions were asked, and some of it was kind of clarifying questions, but also, encouragement, and I think a number of comments that kind of reaffirmed. Folks really saw the breadth, I would say. Folks that commented really saw the breadth of the recommendations and the directions that we are going. And so I think there was certainly some reaffirmation of the issues that we're talking about. It's hard to argue with, the key areas: childcare, healthcare, workforce, broadband, infrastructure, housing. I mean, I think folks saw that reflected and certainly saw the equity lens kind of throughout the language and in terms of our direction, and really resonated with that. So any other comments on that?
Yeah, maybe Paul, this is Penny. I was just looking at my notes reflective of what you just said, but it, primarily I think Linda Sloan said they're in line with her priorities. Jude said, that they like to process outside the chamber because sometimes that's good, where good ideas, the quote was get to be killed. So there was an appreciation of this process too. And I think there was a question, I think Pamela raised it about how do we share it with local government? So getting more to the communication plan and outreach plan. So that was an open question I had and that was raised, right?
Yeah, right up, spot on. Thank you for taking those notes.
Yeah, that was.
It's a listening tool. It's only a listening tool for me. That's why I do it, but it sometimes comes in handy. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, so I'm going to turn it over to Liz just to talk about kind of the recommendations and a little bit around structure.
Yeah. So thank you for all of you who participated in the review activity, the purpose of which was to read the strategies and then kind of indicate what kind of resonated, what helps us understand what rises to the top here. So it's we're consistent. Broadband was a top priority in phase 1 and phase 2 here. So I think that's good. We secured the funding for broadband, and now we phrase this as achieve equitable access to it in the state. So that's a big one. And then I think all of these sort of resonate with the conversations I've been hearing from people. And if you haven't had a chance to fill out this review activity, that link, I didn't close it yet. So we also sent out the roadmap document, and I don't know if many of you have had a chance to look at it yet, but there's two options in there of layout that we will discuss. But we're actually going to bump out into our subgroup breakouts. So I think we're running ahead of schedule. They were going to start at 2:30, but I think we could maybe get started on those a little bit early just to give you a little bit more time. And then we'll come back at 3 and have a large group discussion. So what staff have done is a lot of the strategies and tactics were worded kind of differently across the 5 subcommittees. So what staff did was we basically tried to word them similarly, make them kind of action oriented, add specificity where we could, or clarity. So what we're asking everyone to do in their subgroups is to look at kind of the way the strategies have evolved throughout the last couple of weeks, and then maybe if we missed something, if we lost some intent, add a comment, let the staff know that we might have missed something. And then we had diverging ways of talking about community, BIPOC communities, people of color, Indigenous communities, low-income communities, and it was just different. It was inconsistent throughout the roadmap. So we had Betsy from DLI come and help out and flag for us where we've used some phrasing, and then also channeling a lot of what the governor's office guidance is around that terminology. So that'll be part of it too, is where you reference communities, BIPOC, low income. We flagged that, and if you could add more clarity, if you remember more clarity about it, that would be great, because that level of specificity of who we're talking about specifically is important. And then in a couple of places we combine strategies, so the facilitators know what strategies were combined. I think it's only like 3 or 4. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, but the facilitators know those, and we can talk about those, and when we come back together as a large group, maybe spend some time just like verifying that the combining that we did for those couple of overlapping strategies was appropriate. So,
hey, Liz.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the rankings, and I want to just talk a little bit more. We had a good bit of discussion in the planning team about, hey, how are we going to use these rankings? And I wonder if we can just talk about that for a minute, because we didn't necessarily tell you we were going to be doing, ranking, but we thought we would ask everybody to do it just as a way of just trying to just get a quick pulse on where priorities may lie or rankings may lie for the group. And I don't know, Steve, if any, or Jeff, if either of you want to just talk about how we were thinking about using these or perhaps not using these. Again, we're just seeing the results literally here right now for the first time. But I just wanted to let people know that was kind of under discussion and it's not clear exactly how we'll use this.
What's our tally, Liz, on how many folks were able to complete the activity?
Yeah, we had 10 responses, but Juhi is out, and I think a couple other people might be out. So we're not closing it, but yeah, the purpose of it was really to see what's rising to the top, and then it's up to us how we want to use it. But it's a helpful way to know kind of what our priorities are.
I mean, just one thing from a pragmatic standpoint, in round one, there was, a fairly clear cliff. The top 5 kind of had a level of votes that separated themselves from others. So it's harder to know that yet if there's 5 council members still that have not had a chance to vote. I mean, we probably don't know where that cliff is. So that would be one question worth knowing before we determine, okay, how do we use these? But there's other ways to look at it too.
Yeah, I might just add that when we did I think that's right, Jeff, and as we did the prioritization round 1, we were making a very specific budget recommendation to the governor, right? So it made sense to say, okay, if you have limited budget and you're operating within that confines of these ARPA dollars, here's how we prioritize. With this phase of the work, it's a 10-year outlook, so it's just a different exercise when you think about prioritization. So I think we wanted to do it just to take a pulse of the group, but I think as we get into the conversation a little bit later today on kind of framing and bucketing, maybe this can just help us think that through a little bit better too. It's just one more data point, I think, going into that discussion in terms of how we want to present the final material.
Great, thanks. Any questions or comments on any of that? Thank you, Liz, for indulging me on that.
No, yeah, it was a good flag, Paul. I kind of skimmed over it, but yeah.
Okay, so we're headed to small groups. 2 questions. One, kind of looking at the updated language, any edits, thinking about references to community and or communities, trying to define that a little bit more. Are we still, Liz, also considering option 1 versus option 2?
Yeah, you can talk about that as your small group, but we're going to have that conversation as the large group. And then also we have some suggested rewording of a couple of vision statements just to make them read more similarly. Thanks, Commissioner Grove, for pulling that together. So it only impacts groups 2 and 3, I think, but we'll talk about that in those groups as well. So
okay, so in most task forces and committee processes, they say don't wordsmith. Today we're saying wordsmith.
Now is the time. It's your only time.
All right. Did I see Nick sent us an email with the links to the individual groups?
Yep. So just your facilitators will direct you back here to the regular meeting right at 3. So we'll talk to you in a bit.
Okay.
Or they're in the chat, right? I can see them here too.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Did it work okay to go out and come back, Jeff?
Yep.
Okay. People are trickling back now. All right, we got 2, 3, 4. We're missing 1 and 5 for subgroups. Hey, Paul. Subgroup 5 is trickling back.
Yes. Do we have everybody together?
We're just waiting for subgroup 1.
Okay.
Okay. Here comes 1. Okay, I think we have most people back. And I believe this is where we were going to pick up the conversation. Can people see my screen okay? Okay. So as a lot of you saw in the document, there's two layouts that are in there. And the first one is keeping the strategies underneath the vision statements with some of the ideas combined, like we talked about. And then this other option 2 has strategies grouped by unifying concepts. And Commissioner Grove, if you don't mind, I'd like to turn it over to you to kind of explain. Staff are sort of leaning toward option 2 for a number of reasons as well. But I was just wondering, Commissioner Grove, if you wanted to talk about kind of your framing for that and where, and we can start the conversation there.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Liz. Hey, everybody. So there's just a ton of really great ideas and strategies in this document, and kind of stepping back and trying to look at all of them. We've been considering what will do them the most justice and what will be the most clear to a reader. And in that process, felt like, and I'm sure as you all have looked at this holistically in the past, 45 minutes and maybe previously, there was of course some overlap in ideas, right? Different groups, not surprisingly, came up with similar ideas, or at least ideas kind of in similar areas. And so if you just stuck with every one of our 5 subgroups had a vision statement for which strategies led up to, you end up finding the report repeating itself somewhat often, or at least often enough such that you're like, I thought I read about that 3 pages ago. Isn't this kind of similar? And so we said, well, is there a better way to both honor the vision statements by leaving them in there? Because of course they are what we see, or what we hope to see as the headlines of Minnesota 10 years from now, but also just streamline and clarify the strategies and tactics and ideas, which some of which are huge and some of which are very detailed, in a clear way. And so in an effort to do that, option 2 surfaced as one way to frame the work. And the way that we ended up putting together an option for you all to consider is by keeping them very focused on the how. And so the 5 buckets, as you'll see in that document, and we've kind of framed them as like big bets, like 5 big bets for Minnesota's future. Run really some basic concepts, but betting on Minnesota's people, betting on our infrastructure, betting on innovation, betting on the other two. I don't have them right. Look them up.
Business and communities.
Betting on business and betting on community. And there's sort of an associated sentence with each, which I think we might have circulated an email a little bit ago. But in that way, you sort of have your vision statements that paints the picture that you want to see with the associated context around each vision statement that you all worked on. And then when you get into sort of, okay, well, how do we get there? It's like, okay, to get there, we're going to make these 5 big bets. Here's what they mean. Here's the strategies that ladder up to them. And then you don't get kind of you kind of dedupe the list, if you will, for lack of a better term, but you also have like a roadmap structure. So that's one option. The other option is to stick with the original plan, just stick with our 5 vision statements and the strategies that groups came up with them, and just kind of live with the fact that there's some overlap and repeat, but maintain that initial structure. So we wanted to, I don't know how many people have gone into them and kind of looked at the pros and cons or have thoughts off the top, but I think that's the decision point you wanted to lift up for the group. Is that right, Liz and Paul and Jeff?
Yeah, just because it diverges originally from our original layout, but I think it meets the need that this group has also identified, which is to have a action oriented, something that's really like how driven. Yeah, so we framed it around bets because it's like Commissioner Grove said, it's a bold language choice. And then I think that's also like we have some other options for language choice as well, if that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. But yeah, so wondering people's thoughts on that shift, because it's a shift from how we originally had planned to do it, but I think has higher impact and gets our message across a little clearer. So anyone, the 2 options are in the working draft of the roadmap, I think like 6A and 6B. So.
Thoughts, folks?
Well, until it got described, I would have leaned towards option 1, but now understanding that there's overlap, and after we just did our small subgroup or subcommittee and seeing how some of that stuff that we had talked about was getting moved around in other sections, I think option 2 makes better sense myself.
Penny?
Yeah, we looked at both options. One of the concerns for option 2 was we actually had a logic model for healthcare reform, which was disaggregating data, looking at community-led solutions and co-creating solutions with community, and then structural reform. And those got parsed into different places. So, that's why we liked option 1 best. But if we had to go to option 2, which I understand that makes sense too, we would put our whole thing under people. It's really about the health of people. So we wouldn't separate those things and put it under people. So that would be our second choice. But the last choice would be kind of parsing those apart and putting them so it didn't follow the logic model that we worked through together. So that was our take.
Great. Yeah, your group had probably the most discrete strategy behind the strategies. So anyone else have thoughts or preferences or reactions on the last subgroup conversations?
I guess I don't have a strong preference, but I have a better understanding of option 1. Let's put it that way. It just seems like that was the basis of the visions. That was the work. That was how the work got done. And so I'm a little worried about the flip into people, community, businesses, et cetera, as to whether that emerges with as understandable a product.
And I'll just share my first read of this morning, and I shared with the planning team that I thought I liked the rationale of, isolating kind of the vision statements, the 5, and then trying to minimize duplication or replication in the language. As I read it for a second time just prior to the meeting, I thought that option 1 actually read clearer. And that might just be a reflection of the fact that I've been thinking in the framework of option 1 for some time now, and so it made more sense to me, and it felt like it read more clearly in option 1 than option 2. So that's just one thought. The other piece is that in option 2, it actually felt like the number of bullets got longer. So it felt like it was bigger chunks of text in option 2. Now, I might be wrong about that, but it felt that way. Then the third piece that actually kind of dawned on me again as I was reading it was, and it might just be me, and I'm just old school and too old here, but I didn't like the term bet. Big bets. Bet on, and I get it, and I like the dynamism of that, and kind of the feels edgy, but I don't bet on much. Period. So I literally went and looked up on Google. I Googled thesaurus, for big bets or synonyms, and I could not find a different word that was kind of a better replacement, because I really do like the intention of that, right? Activate, target, invest, accelerate. I mean, none of those feel like great alternatives to bet on our communities, bet on our businesses, bet on this, that, or the other. So I don't know why that jumped out at me, but it was just something that I took away from it in my second reading of the language.
I hadn't thought it. Marty just put a good point in there, and that's on one side. And then I worry politically a little bit. I know we're not supposed to be the political group, but it's kind of like against a backdrop of a potential do-nothing option politically. I can just see the headline: Governor's Council wants to gamble with your money on their progressive priorities. It's like, do we really want to walk into that?
Is there a, I like the framing though of the 5 things, and I wonder if like a belief, if you almost changed it to 5 big beliefs in Minnesota's economic future, or I don't know, there's likely other wording that could very quickly say believe in our people, believe in our community, believe in our businesses, believe in innovation, believe in infrastructure. There's probably 5 other synonyms we could use that would leverage the good thinking there without using the term bet.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, Carrie and I also looked up, we posted like we did a similar the synonyms. I'm just going to say synonyms exercise. But none of them were as punchy as bet. But I do, potentially exclusionary from a cultural perspective. I think we want to avoid that. Believe is stronger than what cultivate, I think, is where one of the words we landed on. So any others? I'm sort of hearing like mixed feedback. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
When I said my preferences for number 2, it was really based off of not wanting to duplicate, like Mr. Grove had said, 3 pages down you're reading. If it can be done in a way that isn't the case, then, I mean, I do believe that, I mean, the way that we structured this was based off of option 1, so everybody's stuff is included. Because we just went through an exercise here in the previous one where we were trying to locate some of the items and the concepts that we had put in our roadmap and found them in different areas. So as long as they're included, I think it's fine. But if don't take mine as a preference for number 2 as anything heavily weighted.
I think, it's not the same conversation, but there is a related conversation here on just the elevator pitch for this whole body of work, right? And just you run into a friend, what have you been doing? I'm working on this console. What did your final report end up saying? What's the first thing that you say the final report ends up saying, right? I mean, obviously you're not going to list off 19 strategies or 97 tactics. You could say 5 big bets pretty quickly, but again, if we're not comfortable with the bet language, that's fine too. But is there what is the thing you want to be able to say that just like encapsulates like, okay, this is kind of the thrust? And I think part of what we've heard folks say here is that this is an inflection point. It's a crossroad. It's a once in a generation moment. Like the time is now feeling has been a part of that elevator pitch. But then is there some framing here that would help us get there too? Because I think the decision we make on structuring the report will influence obviously the elevator pitch forward and how we kind of roll it out, if you will, to folks across the state. The 5 visions are also very bold. They don't have that same ability to kind of encapsulate them in one mental model, at least when I read them. So I'm curious if there's a way to do that if we did go with option 1 that helps us out or not. It's a related kind of question, I think, for the group to consider.
This is just Tracy. I just wanted to offer that I hear what people are saying about the word bet, and I like it because it's easy to say. It has a strong tone to it, but I just throw out there as additional food for thought. There's something about what we're trying to convey that also conveys that we have enough resources so that all of these things could happen, kind of that abundance mentality rather than scarcity that so often pervades conversations about what we can and can't do. Like, there's not enough to do this. So I don't know. I can't say more than that about it, but I do think there's something in there that conveys abundance. Like, we've got everything that we need, and here's how we're going to activate it.
Anyone else who we also maybe haven't heard from yet?
So, Liz, in terms of next steps, again, staff is kind of continually revising this. I'm assuming that the planning team can kind of take this in and talk a little bit about which direction to go with it. Again, I don't want to keep us going down 2 paths in terms of writing, but I think Joe's point is a good one. If there's a way to really clarify the language and eliminate duplication, maybe the second option does make sense. And if there's a way to kind of really crisply and compellingly capture the 5 visions, and we can think about some alternatives, we can keep going on the synonym process. Because I think Scott's right that there's got to be the right word out there, or the right idea.
Yeah, go ahead, Barty.
While I am a little bit worried about the word bet, what I can appreciate about this is that there's something about risk. So, it's risky to make a bet, and it's risky to not make a bet because you could lose, right? And so, although I just want to be really clear that I have concerns about the word bet if we're thinking about an inclusive way of thinking about this, I understand. What I appreciate about it is that we're also in that framing speaking to the risk of not taking action. So I really want to find a different word, but I appreciate that sentiment in this, like in that word. Like, I get it. So I've also been Google searching myself, and I'll also keep thinking about it. But I appreciate that it speaks to the risk of inaction as well. And if there's some way to capture that, maybe without sort of the reference to the game of chance, I think there would be like maybe something we can do. So I do appreciate that.
Marty, I think that's a wonderful point, and I'm just wondering, can we just we ought to add that sentiment or that language to the preamble for sure, whatever we decide, because I think you really captured something there that there is a risk here, and it's kind of two sides of that. I'm sorry, somebody else was going to chime in there.
No, it was just me, Paul. That was a good, yeah. So if anyone strikes gold while Googling, you know where to find me. And email me your words. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Oh, just so I'm clear on my opinion, I'm not that hung up on the word bets, but I don't want to drag out the conversation. I do personally see the merit in trying to organize things in option 2 versus in the committee structure, and I see the challenges with it that everybody raised, but I guess if I had a vote, I would lean towards trying to have a cohesive vision that doesn't really get hung up on the process we followed to get there. So I just wanted to share that opinion.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Okay, so my slide is projecting sort of a couple of other conversations I want us to have. And I really just want to hear from you all, sort of like a pulse check as we go into the next couple of weeks, editing and trying to turn this around. And maybe before we go into this discussion, I'll just share that we are going to hopefully get a draft of the roadmap to everyone with the preamble included. We have a great preamble in the works we're just cleaning up a little bit. Hopefully by Friday or Monday. And then everyone can have a little bit of time with it before it goes into a series of review cycles with communications and government relations, governor's office, people with a policy lens. So that's kind of the coming weeks. But I want a pulse check. I want to know kind of how people are feeling about where we're at. If you've had a chance to dig in and try and read through what we have so far and see how it fits together and see how it all kind of fits across groups. So yeah, this is 6 questions, but I really just want to get a pulse check. This is so.
What do folks think?
Well, I'm never short for words, so I like it, but in our subgroup committee, we were trying to locate some of the stuff that we had worked really hard on. So just as an overall, I haven't been able to review all 25 pages of the roadmap, but as long as that stuff's in there, I kind of like the way we're going right now. But that's pretty generalized, but I'll leave it at that for right now, assuming that what we feel is important is in there.
Other thoughts?
I might just throw out, I'm kind of looking at the report and doing a control F for words that I'm wondering if they're there or not. And I do a control F for rural, right? Did we get enough focus on greater Minnesota and sort of rural parts of the state? And I think a lot of the ideas inherently do, especially in the healthcare space and in the broadband space. But I think maybe just in that last bullet point, what is missing, one thing might be to do, and you mentioned, Liz, kind of taking us through the policy lens, how you word something is really important in terms of inclusivity and who you're speaking to. And we might want to just take a look at that when we're speaking about broadband, really call out Greater Minnesota or some of the healthcare work that group really did that was thoughtful, just lifting up some of those pieces that speak to Greater Minnesota in particular, because I think that's an area of our state that's changing dramatically, right, and faces some real existential threats. And I think a lot of these things are addressed very directly there, but I wonder if we just want to kind of amplify that a little bit in a few spaces just to call it out.
Yeah, that's great. And I don't want to put Brenda on the spot too much either, but she had a great lens mental shift that I'm going to look at the roadmap with a new lens with, and that's kind of centering labor more than we do, and collaboration with labor. So that was another miss that I'm looking forward to integrating.
We talked about it early on in our meetings, just around how do we center, how do we incorporate equity into this statement? And I think it does come off in different pieces, but is there consistency across that in the entire document? To Commissioner Grove's point around making sure that, rural is also different than Greater Minnesota. Communities of color in rural communities are also a bit different than, communities that are located in the Twin Cities. So I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out, like, is there a, as we're thinking about like a preamble and the introduction, is there a way for us to make sure that we are uplifting the the conversation we had early on in the process, especially tied to the changing demographics of Minnesota moving forward? And I also love Brenda's perspective as well. Like I think there's a lot of discussion just around like, how do we bring in more businesses and how do we, help support businesses, which is of course is important, but it also needs to be offset by the fact that businesses need customers as well as workers as well. So how are we making sure that they're included in the roadmap?
And Liz, I'll just comment. And again, I wasn't able to be part of the preamble subcommittee that met last week, but I think that preamble, the draft that I saw, and again, I didn't get into every word of it, but I really liked. And I think the preamble is actually quite important because it stages several of the issues and sets the tone, I think, in really important ways for what follows. And so I feel like when we get that preamble, further refined, maybe shortened a little bit. Right now it was sitting at, I think, 4 pages, or at least in that draft that I looked at. And if you take out either option 1 or option 2, we're probably looking at about another dozen pages or so. So this report is going to be, kind of, 16, 18 pages probably when all is said and done. But to me, that preamble is really important. And I really liked a lot of the language. I don't know if it kind of clarified all the definitions that need to be clarified, but it really set the tone, I thought, in an important way.
Yeah, so we're working on getting that kind of cleaned up and centered on the vision. But yeah, it's strong, impactful. I'm excited to share it with people as part of the full working doc of in our final draft. Yeah, and then my other question on here, and we had started talking about this beforehand, and we can track down a couple more, the rest of the people who didn't get a chance to fill it in, but that roadmap review activity, one option would be to sort of emphasize some of the top ideas in an executive summary. I think that's one way that staff had kind of thought about using it. So if that feels okay with people, I don't know exactly where we're going to cut it off. We can't list all 19 ideas in the executive summary, but maybe top 5, 7 would make it up there. So that's just one way of how we can maybe incorporate that filtering. Yeah, go ahead, Penny.
Yeah, I like that kind of executive summary. See if it gets to your kind of elevator speech that all of us can do as we roll this out to others. So I think that's great. One of the things I noticed in the voting procedure, Liz, is that we kind of, for healthcare, for an example, there's an Uber line about healthcare, and then there were several others that got votes, which were kind of sub strategies. So, I think there's some consolidation in there that can happen as well. So that, but I like that. The other thing I put it in my comments on the survey, but one thing I would love to add, if we could, about how would we know that we're, closing the disparities in education? How will we know that we're giving people healthier days? What would we look at for our success? I would really love a section in there that says, this is how we'll know that what we have done, recommended, once instituted, has been successful. So that's another ad that could be missing that we might be able to think about as well.
Great. Another thing that staff have sort of been working on behind the scenes is kind of what it looks like to have this not be a recommendation or a roadmap that lives on the shelf. And this council, by the executive order, disbands on 6:30, and then we're working on scheduling something with the Gov's office that will hopefully get that nailed down in the next couple of weeks. But the question is out there, and I think, I don't want to pick on you too much, Barty, but I know you've had experience like shopping around plans that are really, really great. So I'm wondering sort of what people's thoughts are on, after we do the baton handoff here to the Gov's office, and what that looks like.
Well, I know that this is Barty. I know that we've talked a little bit about a communication strategy in terms of, like, once the report is done and the governor's office has it. So, I think that there's an opportunity for us to think about how we use that communication strategy to get this out to folks. I also think it would be really great for us to be able to share this report once it's all finalized and the governor is okay with it, to go back to all of the folks that we spoke to, either as individual subgroups, and we had a lot of special guests that joined us throughout the year. So I think taking it back to them. I also think, like, depending upon how fancy or involved we want to get or not, like, I'd be curious, are there any ways that we, I love me a good toolkit. Again, super nonprofit, thinking about how do you create things that people can then take and use them in different places and spaces. So, does this group have any thoughts or ideas about, like, who would we love? Like, if we could dream of the greatest outreach strategy that was ever designed to, like, operationalize this plan, whose hands would we want this report to get into? How would we want them to use it? What would we want to know as they're learning and they're, as they're doing that would be great. I don't know. I mean, I just think that, like, this group might have some thoughts or ideas about, if we had a dream list of all the folks that we had it, all the ways that they could be implementing it, what would it look like? So then, working backwards from that ideal, what would we need to do from a comm strategy, from being lovely ambassadors of this report as we go out into the community? I don't know, as council members, right? Those are just some thoughts I have.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Well, I was just going to say, in addition to what Barty said, I think that in order to do that, one of the things that we would also have to do is look at the different strategies that we have or recommendations and decide who or what or where is the right place for that to become operational. So for example, for me as an individual on this council, while I can know about housing and I can talk about it to people, I don't really have access to something that's going to help that situation right now other than just my voice. And so I think getting more specific about who in the community, who in the government could actually help to take these ideas and implement them, make them operational, use them as a lens that they look through. I think could be, rather than just keeping it real general, because it's going to make it hard for anybody to kind of be responsible for it or to put it into action. I just wanted to quickly say one other thing too about this idea of the word bet. I was just looking at the definition of what it means to place a bet. And I think that if there was some statement, as short as possible and concise as possible, but to say that the reason that we would be willing to risk something is because we believe in Minnesota, we believe in the people that live here, and I think we believe that through the right investments and actions, we could actually have a more equitable economy, that it's possible. And that's why we'd be willing to risk the monies that we have available to spend to take these actions, because we believe that it's possible. And if we didn't believe that, we wouldn't want to place this bet, and maybe there's some kind of prefacing that could help make that a usable word if we clarified it's because we believe in Minnesota and the people that are here.
I think because I'm not an expert on how to get policy made. I mean, I guess I've always thought of the purpose of this document is to reprioritize the funds that state government invests in our economy for the future. And so the main audience is, if all we had to do is, send it off to the legislature and we thought it would get that policies would start being made, I think that would be great. I think just the world's more complicated than that. So I guess I'd volunteer to be part of any kind of advocacy or roadshow or anything we could or should be doing. I just don't, it's not my area of expertise, how best to do that. So I think it's a little sad how there's always a lobbyist for specific issues, but there's often not a lobbyist for doing the things that are best for all of us. And so if we could be those lobbyists with a little bit of help, I'm sure everybody on this committee would be happy to play. Well, I can't speak for everyone, but a lot of us would be happy to play a role in that. So I really appreciate the question, and I'm certainly available to help and support it. It's my worst nightmare that it just kind of becomes another giant document that says a lot of things and sits on the shelf.
Part of the question that jumps out at me, and I agree, Scott. I mean, I certainly will be willing to do some of that, be part of that roadshow. Already am part of that roadshow, actually. And that actually takes a lot of work. So we shouldn't underestimate that if we're really going to do that well. And I think that is part of it. I also think just a high quality distribution. I like the original idea, Liz, of reaching out to all the people who talk to us. Those are networks. Those are leaders of influence, and getting this back out in people's hands and into the hands of influencers, I do think is important. I think a little bit of a media strategy may not be a bad idea as well. All of that, though, to me, goes back to the governor. So the governor asked us to come together and do this work, and we did, and we will have done it. Part of my question is, what is the governor's commitment to following up on this, to actually leading the charge, along with the lieutenant governor and along with the commissioners, to be quite honest. The commissioners are significant leaders of influence themselves. And so I need to see a little bit of a strategy from leadership in government, including the governor himself and the lieutenant governor, alongside the commitment that I'm going to make to follow up on this. And that needs to be robust from my perspective, because this is taken a big bite out of my time, and I don't want to see it sit on the shelf either. And you're right, really good policy change happens because lobbyists work it, and they work relationships, and they work the right spots of influence. And so who are going to be our lobbyists? I want the governor to be one of our lobbyists.
Yeah, so this is definitely something that staff are trying to think about, this communications and rollout plan. We've been talking to the Govs people and trying to get a pulse on that. And so we'll have more information by the end of the month. I just I was just wondering, because I think I'm with all of you who have said, like, there's nothing worse than a plan that just sits static on a shelf. So yeah, looking forward to that. We have just a couple of slides left in this presentation. I want to get through them, and then if we have more time, we can open it up again. So I mentioned this already, a couple of upcoming review cycles that we're starting to narrow down. So the working draft is always available, but we're hoping to have at least a meatier draft, maybe like a second draft. I would say we're still in first draft world. Second or third draft to send out to you all on Friday or Monday that includes the preamble and option 1 or option 2, however we feel as the planning team how that lines up. And then we'll also have our communications staff from the different agencies take a look at it and clean it up like they did last time, because they made it look quite pretty for us last time as well. And then a little bittersweet, our next meeting together is our last full council meeting together. And we're going to do it in person. And we'll have a hybrid option. It won't be as produced as last time, but you could call in if you wanted to. And it's going to be, this says June 6th, but it's June 27th. Yeah, not the 6th. Sorry, everyone. And it'll be at 540 Cedar in St. Paul, and we'll send you all the details and update the next meeting. And we'll basically look at those final edits, kind of flag what came through in this coming month with everyone's feedback. And so since we don't have a meeting between now and the 27th, and the 27th is 3 days before the report is due, I would encourage everyone to be active on email. I think that's kind of going to be the way to get this across the finish line. So engage on the emails. And then part of our time is going to be dedicating to celebrating the massive accomplishment that this was. And so we'll have some mingling time as well and be able to celebrate. So I think that was all I had in the slide deck. Anything else from you all as we go into this last sprint here? Second to last meeting.
Did we ever land on whether there's the final interaction between the council and the governor and lieutenant governor? And do we get to present it to them like we did around phase 1?
Yeah. Elizabeth, do you have an update on where that kind of is at, where that has landed? Or maybe Commissioner Grove, you know as well.
Yeah, we've been in touch with their policy and scheduling team. So he's looking at, it'd be likely in July, but we're trying to lock in a date. So we'll get that out to you all as soon as we can, as soon as we have it.
Okay, any other thoughts, closing thoughts, questions? Jeff, any final words of wisdom from you for today?
I mean, I guess I have just this little hesitancy about, I mean, is there any formal loop closing that's going to happen with I think we're missing 5 people today. It's like, I mean, to me, it's really important that everyone is aligned ultimately. And we did provide that opportunity in phase 1. And, you know, we still can do that on the 27th, obviously. But if we get a big change in direction between now and the 27th, you need time to work on it. So I don't know if it makes sense to have some kind of loop back to the folks who were not able to attend and kind of say, here's where we're at, and we're asking one more time for, you know, some form of input.
Yeah, I think I think that's worth it, and maybe it could even come, like staff could help put it together, but maybe it could even come from the chairs and the execs.
That'd be fine.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion, Jeff. Okay, well, with that, I think we're done about 12 minutes early. So again, thanks for some really good work here today, and again, keep your eye out on your email box from correspondence and additional drafts, and we'll keep working away at it. I think we're getting close. So appreciate everybody's time, and enjoy the sun. I think it might be out. All right, take care.
Great. Thanks, everyone.